Good morning, everybody. This is Timothy Zellmer from Hotel Central Boquete and Live Free University. I'm going to talk today about typico. What is typical foods in Panama? And I'm standing underneath a papaya tree. This is right next door to my house. One of the most typical things of all. And this is permaculture. This is permaculture. It's just here happening on its own. This is a little piece of jungle right here. Notice what they've got here is orange trees in the backyard. So they have papaya. They make chicha from that. Chicha is a natural juice. They stomp up the papaya and make a juice out of it. And here is something super important to the Panamanians. These are plantains, plantain bananas, and these just came down this week. Nobody's claimed them. They're almost on our yard. I don't know if we're going to use them, but this makes a very important food. It's called patacones. Plantains are platanos in Spanish, and they slice those up into chunks about 3/4 inch long and fry them in oil until they soften on the outside, and then they squish them. They squish them and refry them again. You can't eat them raw. It looks like a banana, but it's not. It's a plantain or a platano, and they eat them. It's one of the huge food groups here is plantains. They're very, very inexpensive. You can get a big bundle like that. They're pretty cheap. They sell them everywhere. So patacones, these fried plantain chips, are one of the main foods that you see eaten all the time. This is a community, a place here in Boquete, Panama. Buen día, ¿cómo está? That eats a lot of rice. Rice is the starch staple and is an accompaniment for many meals. Oftentimes eaten 3 times a day. Very inexpensive food and is kept ready to be warmed up. Rice has an important component here, concho, and that's the hard crust at the bottom of the bowl that is super important to Panamanians. They'll fight you for it. It's the preferred piece of rice is the hard browned chunks that are scraped from the bottom of the pan. And that's a super interesting thing. But buen día, caballeros, ¿cómo está? This concho I learned about in university. I had a roommate from Panama, and he would cook on my little camp stove and create concho. Buen día, ¿cómo está? And concho is interesting. They scrape it off the bottom of the bowl, and it's hard as shell, and that's what concho means, I believe. So breakfast. What do they have for breakfast here? Common thing. Hola primo, ¿cómo está? And an important thing in the morning is liver and onions, and you can get that very inexpensively downtown at one of the Sabrazones. There's always a big line there for $2 or $3. You can get liver with gravy and onions and an hojaldra or tortilla. An hojaldra is basically Indian fry bread, and they're delicious when they're fresh. Stab it in the gravy and eat it. It's a marvelous meal full of vitamins. I do that about every week or two, just get a lot of good vitamins. And these are Floripondia here. They just smell amazing. Look. They are some of the best smelling flowers in town right here by the river by my house. Buen día, ¿cómo está? And so that's a normal thing to have. And tortillas are a corn cake, ground corn, fried in oil, and my wife loves those. We love the hojaldras, and those are in the class of food called frittatas. Frittatas are fried or smoked foods, and the list of them that we eat, and for about 20 bucks you can get enough for a family of 4 or 5. And buenas, señora, ¿cómo está? Muy bien. And the frittatas that we bring home, they're greasy food. They're fried mostly. They're smoked meats, chicken, pork, and beef. The pork and beef are the typical ones that you see, and they're smoked. They have like a red treated kind of a meat, and that's really a big deal when we do that on a Friday or Saturday night. Costs 20 bucks. You can feed a house full of people. Now the things that we get with that are abundagos. Abundagos are just a meatball, a small one, and abundagos come with a sauce that I like quite a bit for dipping my hojaldras or the fry bread in. And hey boys, and the other thing that comes with it is the hojaldras, and so we got the smoked meat, we've got the juice, like a little cup with the meatballs, and then they got almohabanos. They're like tortillas, like I say, in ground corn, but they're shaped into snakes, skinny head and tail snakes, about yay long. And they have like an S curve to them, and they are delicious when they're fresh. They are fried in grease, so this is not the best thing, but it's odd, we don't typically have patacones with those. So it'll be the meatballs, these corn snakes, and the fry bread, and the smoked meat is a big deluxe. And pareadas you'll get, like if you go to the fair. We have a lot of festivals here. Oh my gosh, you can't be depressed here. There's too many fairs, there's too many festivals. And pareadas are basically like a bratwurst sized sausage cut in a scroll and then fried on a griddle, and they're stuck on a stick, and you buy them off the street. So we have free concerts downtown all the time. We always have that, and that's sort of a traditional thing that we always eat is pareadas. So like a soda pop or a beer, then walking around or dancing with sharing these meat on a stick. Now, what other typicals can we think of? The American influence sort of freaks out Americans when they're here in Panama. And the biggest one is this thing with American cheese and Spam. You know, the ground ham in a can that comes from the old homeland, Minnesota. And see, the soldiers and the Americans, they brought that with them with the canal and the project of all that. So it became a big deal and became, believe it or not, the good cheese, the yellow cheese, which now I guess a lot of folks are terrified of it, think it's not really food, and Spam. But I guess, you know, I checked it out. I went to Minnesota and saw the museum. It really is good. But like when we're being lazy, we'll make up patacones and Spam for dinner. It'll be kind of a late night snack. It's sliced really thin and fried, and that's our treat in an evening. Maybe with a little ketchup I do that. But that's a real typical thing, is to see like omelets with American cheese inside. And they like the ones that are in plastic wrap, the single serving, you know, you peel off the, so you'll see that pretty commonly. The other kind of cheese that they have is a typical milk cheese, and it's called queso prensa. And I love the version that's called Che, C-H-E, Che. And it's a pressed milk cheese. And you know, in Mexico they have one that's a little stronger, a little drier. And darned if I haven't kind of fallen in love with queso prensa. It's a pressed cheese, and there's a bunch of ladies with little kids that have put dollies on a bucket and a handle that are going around town selling fresh pressed milk cheese. And that's queso prensa, queso prensa. And, oh, Casey's really ferocious. And the other thing that you'll see very typically is chicha. Chicha is where they have some kind of a fruit, maybe it's getting too ripe to eat, and like a zarzamora or blackberry raspberry type. They grow a lot of raspberries and blackberries all over the place here in backyards. And they'll take those, squish them up, and filter out the juice, add a little of this, and another traditional thing is this all sugar. This is like a, what we'd know as like a brown type sugar, except it's got everything in it. The molasses, the vitamins, and all it is dried sugarcane juice. It's filtered and dried. And once in a while, you'll get like a little chunk of dirt or a pebble in it, and they show them on TV that they're out there barefoot raking this stuff while it's drying. And my wife likes to say somebody had a little pebble stuck between their toes and it fell out, so she gets kind of grossed out by that. It's sort of funny. But they'll make chicha out of that, and also they use this stuff called raspadura. Raspar means to file, and it's hard, and instead of like granules, it's like a brick. And they use that to make big jars of chicha with some kind of fruit, and they mix it up, and like, because it's so sour, miracle fruit, and that's called maracuya chicha, they use the raspadura, and that's super excellent, and I think pretty good vitamins for you. So that's kind of the typical thing. The other thing is like right here, I'm walking, and that's where Lydia's Bakery is. Buena. Lydia's Bakery is right here. Right there next to Tres Scalini. Now, they have the morning bread, which is super important. You want to impress somebody, you bring them morning bread. And there's basically two kinds of bread. Pan de piso. Piso means floor. It's like hard as the floor. And pan machita, which are these really soft ones. They're golden toasted. And they have this thing where kind of traditionally they'll make a little hole in the middle of one of those and put their butter and jam or eggs or sausage or whatever the heck they got. And that's a big thing. Morning bread. Morning bread is super important to them. The fresh bread at Lydia's, I think, is my favorite. Buen dia, ¿cómo está? She's so cute. So those are some of the typical foods. And so, like in the morning, you can live super cheap and pretty darn healthy. And that's a school bus there. Colegial. Because like in the morning, you can get Frankfurters is another thing. They really like wieners, chopped and fried or boiled. Frankfurters is an American thing that they brought down here, and they eat a lot of Frankfurters, guys. And Frankfurters and eggs, you can get that for $1.50. down at Sabrisson's, which is what they call a typico restaurant. Now, another thing they do, like for breakfast, would be like a little coffee, and coffee, super important. This is the coffee mecca. And see here, right here is Jenny's. And she is an incredible cook. That's called a typico. See, it's right there. Just next to the Posada, which is an Argentine restaurant. And she's famous. She'll have guanabana chicha. Guanabana is this medicinal fruit. It looks like a giant avocado with horns, about big as your head if they've been pollinated correctly. They have male and female trees both with flowers, and to get them to pollinate properly, you have to use a little tiny brush and cross-pollinate them. You have to identify which are the males and females. The ones that I see sometimes and are brought from friends are the ones that have not been pollinated. They don't grow big. They don't have these giant weird bean-like seeds that are really tough to remove. And she makes a chicha made of this, where they stomp it up. They got a little bit in there and they sweeten it up with a little bit of that raspadura, the bricks of sugar. And that's like a medicinal fruit, believe it or not. If you've got, and look here, here's some more Floripondia for you. Oh, they're just so beautiful. The thing with this typical fruit, this guanabana, is it's super medicinal. They're studying it up at University of Ohio. They notice people that eat that, they don't get cancer and heart disease, and it's antibacterial, antiviral. But the main thing the indigenous here have taught me is it's great for diarrhea, for parasites, for all of that. So they'll have that, a cup of that, 1 hour before their first meal and before their last meal, and it really does help. Yeah, I had some tummy troubles and finally did that like they're suggesting. Now this is coffee right here. These are coffee plants, and that's super important. See here, they got so much coffee, it's just rotting on the tree. Nobody is tending to these. They're just on the fence line. There's so much coffee here. And people will gather these up from the neighborhood and take the cherry off the red part and let them dry and kind of scrub up to clean them up, and then roast them over the fire. And boom, you got coffee. So the poorest of the poor actually have coffee every morning. So that's a typical thing that they're eating. So those are some of the foods of Panama. Now, for breakfast, you might have had then some hojaldras, or the fry bread, with maybe one of them golden tortillas that are called hojaldra. I forget what they're called. But anyways, the yellow Dodgers, I don't really go for them too much. They're a little too greasy for me. I like the hojaldras. Liver, onions with peppers and gravy, super delicious, and a little chicha or coffee, and sometimes eggs and chopped wieners. So that's a very typical morning. Now, Sancocho for lunch. Jenny's down behind us. She's got a great Sancocho for there to go. It's like $1.25, less than $2 for sure. And that's sort of a, hey, look here, we're at the Hotel Central Boquete. So Sancocho is sort of a weird soup. It's super boring for Americans. It's really healthy. They might have a little piece of potato, a little short piece of corn on the cob, and some really kind of crazy looking meat, like one little chunk. And then and then otoi, which is like a root. It's kind of a funny, lightly reddish kind of colored thing. And then yam, yame, and yuca. And that's another typical thing. They chop these things up, fry them, and then I love them with cream cheese, yuca. Yuca is a big, important starchy food, kind of a treat, but that'll be in the soup called Sancocho. Now, Sancocho, usually with the Panamanian, if they're really wanting to get full, they paid about $1.25 for a nice big bowl of Sancocho. It's just super cheap, wonderful soup. They'll buy a little plate of white rice and slowly shovel it in, and I kind of like that now too. They always have hot sauce on there to add a little zest to it because it's like kind of low flavor. But the Sancocho for lunch is a great way to go. For less than $2, you can have you a nice lunch. And see there, that's my Auto Rapido, first one in Panama. Drive-through coffee at Cafe Central here at Hotel Central Boquete. You can't make this up. So you had that for lunch, you're feeling pretty good. Maybe even got a little chicha. You didn't have coffee for lunch, you have a little chicha. They have the zarzamora, the banana, all kinds of different chicha, and that's pretty cool. So then in the evening, they do a thing with meat and cheese that's way less volume than what Americans are used to, and the meat tends to be really thin. When my wife and I were dating, I brought home some real juicy, thick steaks, all marbled up. And when I came into the kitchen, she had sliced them thin and was cooking the hell out of them. They kind of have a different idea about healthy and cleanliness, and also like when you're trying to order eggs over easy with the milky, the juicy yolks. Good luck with that. They are really afraid of making people sick with the fat steaks and the juicy eggs undercooked. And maybe they got some reasons for that historically. So that's something you got to take into consideration, the typical preparation of food. The thing is that for the evening meal, we'll do spaghetti like normal folks. They like spaghetti. And look here, my beautiful hortensias. Isn't that nice? You see there? Oh yeah, big, giant flowers. So so that's lunch, breakfast, dinner, and treats. And what else can I tell you? Panama's great. Try the Típico. The Típico is called, they call them kioscos. A kiosco is like a kiosk is what they're using the word for, but if you go north of the hotel here to where the road splits and take the right, just before the bridge that's almost right there is Kiosco Danny, and that's our favorite place to pick up frittatas. It's in her home, and that's super cool because you can sit down and watch TV with the family and the kids, and she's got like a dinner table there and a sofa. It's a kiosco, and it's right north of us here, just before the road splits. You take the right split, and just a moments later on your left, you'll see down a little hill with a sign hanging in the tree, Kiosco Danny, and that's where you get your frittatas, the fried foods, and that's a super cool thing to do. I guess there's a new one of these places in town, but I haven't been there yet. So that's the Típico, or this is typical Panamanian food. So this is Timothy Zellmer at Hotel Central Boquete for Live Free University. Thank you very much for being here today. I enjoyed being here. Thank you kindly. Bye-bye.